This is the Low Level Hell Podcast, Episode 14.
Delta 6, go 6 right. I got your back, man. Any forces on the ground, you are clear to engage. Fire, take a fire.
IED placers
Flight 6, fire coming from this spot. Have him come around, pick over trail. We take a fire from 4 different places. That was quite a bit of fire there.
heading east, going low level.
Welcome to the Low Level Hell Podcast, the program that explores the world of rotary and fixed-wing combat aviation through the exciting stories of the men and women who experienced it firsthand. Now, here's your host, U.S. Army helicopter pilot, Brian Harris.
Hey guys and gals, welcome back to International Month here on the show. Last week we traveled to the frozen wastelands, I'm kidding, of Canada, and now we're traveling down to the land where toilets flush in the wrong direction and all the wildlife can murder you. But before we do that, I want to thank all of you for leaving reviews and comments. Oh wait, not all of you have done that yet. Okay, well that's real easy. Just take a look at wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can probably scroll down to the bottom, find some little stars or thumbs, and just start tapping away. Then you can probably find a space where you can leave a comment and tell me how much you love the show and wish that it was on all the time. Actually, don't do that because I can barely keep up with twice a month, but you get the idea. All right, going to roll into this week's guest. I apologize. There's a little clicking sound on Scott's audio. Not sure if that was a mic or the software we use, but I was talking to a guy literally on the other side of the planet from me, so I think we can afford a little leeway into sound quality. Hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you on the wrap-up. All right, everybody. Welcome to the episode here. We're with Scott Matthey, who is a former Australian Army pilot, and I believe you do some medevac now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. I'm a HEMS pilot now. Okay,
great. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. We're kind of continuing our series here. I wanted to kind of do an international series, if you will. So I just want to learn a little bit about the other side, how the other side lives, I guess you could say, and a little bit about the Australian Army and how the helicopters work there. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of go through it from there.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. A bit about myself. Normally, I'm known as Bear. That's my nickname in real life as well as online. So I'm just a normal small town kid who finished high school and didn't know what to do. So I couldn't milk a cow or fix a car. So that was pretty much it for job prospects in my hometown. Half the other kids in my school seemed to be going to uni or college, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. Growing up, I wanted to be a pilot, but in the same way, I wanted to be an astronaut and a cowboy and a motorbike policeman. Just one of those dreams that. Exactly, it's something that other people do. Well, it wasn't for me. Growing up, I had all the I don't know if you had them, like the Air Force monthly magazines and airplane magazines with the big fold-out picture in the middle of an A-10 or an F-16. Yeah. And I used to get all of those and just loved them, but never really took it seriously. So I finished school and had no idea what I wanted to do. So figured I'd join the Army, and for the 4 years I signed on, they'd feed me, they'd pay me. I'd get to do some cool stuff, and maybe by the time I was ready to get out, I'd have figured out what I wanted to do. So initially I joined as a soldier, into Signals Corps. Went through normal basic training in the mid '90s, back in '94, which is a long time ago now. Went through basic training, and that was. I wouldn't do it again, but one of those things I'm so glad I did it. It really drills home your resilience. It makes you fairly bulletproof to insults and punishment, and you learn just how far you can run, which was a lot further than I thought beforehand. So, and then I went into Signals Corps, and for 4 years I was a EW, or electronic warfare operator. And basically, just listening into the enemy's communications and other little side jobs like DF and things like that. And that was cool fun. We initially went to 7 Sig Regiment EW, which was a field unit, and it was lots of run around the bush and the big heavy pack on my back and doing cool stuff like, the static line parachute course, which is a great idea when you're 18 or 19, but... when you're an adult, you don't want to do it because it's a great, easy way to breathe.
I went to airborne school. I think I was 33, And I immediately regretted it. Yeah.
I can't remember how many guys we had, but we had so many injuries. And, a few big ones, like guy blows out his knee completely, another guy hurt his back pretty badly. And a lot of those guys didn't seem to do a whole lot wrong. Those old round shoots, you just hit the deck pretty hard. But yeah, so after a couple of years of, running around the bush doing silly army stuff, which was perfect for me when I was 18, I got sent to Canberra, capital, to basically work the same job, but operationally, so indoors. And yeah, it was year-round shift work, sitting down at a computer with a couple of screens, headphones on the whole time, and listening into our targets. And for a 19, 20-year-old kid, that was terrible. I could. It was a slow death. Yeah. And it's not what I wanted. And so I started to seriously think about what I was going to do next. And I'd seen helicopters while I was in the army, and read into it and realized that I met the minimum qualifications, and perhaps it was something that I could do. It wasn't just for other people. So I started my application, and in the interim actually got out and worked in a computer game store part-time for a year, which was a nice break. But yeah, in 2000 was selected for a SSO pilot. Now for us, in the Australian Army at the time, it's changed now, but 20 years ago there were two streams to go in. There was GSO, or a General Service Officer, and that's your normal officer, same as an infantry guy, same as armoured, same as everything. They do 18 months at the Royal Military College Duntroon in Canberra, and at the end of it, they all pretty much come out the same. At the end of it, they're all trained, but probably not capable of leading a platoon of troops up a hill and killing the enemy. And from there, they go on to do pilot training. Now, they also had the SSO, which is the Specialist Service Officer scheme, which is probably similar to the warrant scheme for you guys, although we all wear the same rank, which is a fair bit different.
And get paid the same.
Get paid the same, yeah. Now, obviously, your career progression will be a little bit different. And on paper, you're there for a different reason. Like a warrant scheme, you're there to be the flying or pilot specialist, and remain in the flying stream with the maintenance slots, instructor slots, things like that. Which it didn't quite work out. It wasn't as formal as the warrant scheme, and especially since we're all wearing the same rank, it was very easy for that line to sort of get blurred in between the two types of officers. And these days they don't even have SSOs.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, basically it's something that came up as to fill a shortfall in the pilots they had, and not for most of the army, but for a lot of the older or more senior officers, a lot of them really hated the idea of having pretend officers there, wearing the same rank they used to wear, and but yeah. Supposedly
jealous,
possibly jealous, and look, technically you could have got a guy straight off the street, and we certainly did. We had a lot of guys straight off the street, and you do a 7-week course at RMC, which is the same thing. The nursing officers, the padre, the education officers, all the pretend officers who just have a qualification the army needs. We all do that same course, and it is a pretty token affair. In that 7 weeks, you kind of they give you a bit of it's called a knife and fork course, which so that they teach you how to hold a knife and fork like a real officer, and then send you on your way. They try and give you one lesson of everything that the real officers do in 18 months, but you can imagine none of that really sticks. And then you do a little bit of field phase, which is pretty much like doing your annual infantry minor tactics in a normal unit, where you go out and you sleep under a hutchie and you learn how to eat a ration pack. For guys who'd never done it before, it was interesting. But for guys who'd been soldiers before, which was most of us, it was like a waste of time is the wrong term to use, but it was a waste of time. Anyway.
So was that typical? Not to cut you off, but I'm just trying to understand the typical flow of pilots in the Australian Army. So, for us, the typical flow would be, well, from the commission side, you went to college, or in your case, you're talking about the academy there. But for the warrant officers, you could be an enlisted guy, or you could be street to seat. But it sounds like it was the same for the what you call SSOs. You could be a little bit of, you could be one or the other, and that was pretty much how it was. I mean, it wasn't odd for you as an enlisted guy to go that route?
No, that's it. It was fairly common for guys, retreads, we call ourselves, for guys to go from soldier to SSO. It didn't really confer any benefits on the application process. Didn't make it any easier to get in, but obviously just your practical skills and knowledge just meant it was a lot easier to figure out how to get through the course and how to exist in the Army, because for the guys that go from the street, most of them had no military experience whatsoever. Then they do the 7-week course that didn't really teach them a whole lot. They get a lesson on everything, and you learn about a pretend enemy's mechanized infantry division, which doesn't stick longer than the 45 minutes that you do the lesson. And then we all go off and do our flying training, which at the time was usually around about 1.5 to 2 years. And then, boom, you're in your squadron as a brand new lieutenant. And so if you come from the street, you really didn't remember anything from that 7 weeks at RMC because it was 2 years ago. It wasn't very thoroughly taught, or at least not thoroughly retained. I probably shouldn't blame the teaching. It was more that we had, we were thinking about our flying training. Then you do 1.5 years of flying training, which isn't particularly military, or certainly not focused on the rest of the Army. While you're going through that, and then boom, you show up your unit. You're a brand new lieutenant, and if you're dealing with other units, you're dealing with a platoon of infantry. They don't know your background, they don't know the level of training you had. They just know you're a lieutenant, so they have a certain expectation of what that means as far as what your skills and knowledge are. So occasionally there would be a bit of a disconnect there when you get guys straight from the street. They'd have a different level of experience or background, and occasionally we'd just send an NCO along with them as a responsible adult and translator. And we had a couple of guys. A friend of mine came from the Air Force. He was a maintainer on F-111s, and he came across. So overall, you still had a good experience with the military and a good understanding of what the Army was about. But particularly with acronyms and things like that, he'd sit there in the brief, particularly with armored guys, and he'd have to have a corporal sitting next to him, whispering in his ear all the time, explaining what it was the colonel was talking about. Yeah,
that sounds familiar. I mean, just for our own lieutenants who, like you said, probably don't have as much exposure. I mean, if they went to the academy, that's one thing. If they went to ROTC, they went straight into flight school. Because like you said, flight school is not really anything military. It's you're spending all your time worried about how to fly the aircraft.
Yeah, exactly. And ours, at least the first 6 months, wasn't particularly military at all. Pardon me. After your officer training, whether you go GSO or SSO, again, it's changed now, but at the time we would go to the BFTS, or the Basic Flight Training School, which was actually a civilian flying organisation there run by British Aerospace. And it was, we still had an Air Force CO. This was tri-service, Army, Navy, and Air Force, all doing fixed wing. But it was run by the Air Force. So again, not particularly military, or at least as Army guys think about it.
So that's universal.
It is absolutely universal, and I can get away with it because my wife's ex-Air Force, so I'm married into it. But I tell my kids the Air Force it's great if you like uniforms, but you're scared of guns. That's what you do. I
always call them the corporation.
It is, and for a little while there, the uniforms changed regularly, of course, but for a little while there, they weren't a uniform that made them just look like postal workers. But
gosh.
but having said that, generally the guys that go to the Air Force, they know what they're getting into, and that's exactly what they want.
I mean, we're sitting here busting their balls a little bit, but just for listeners who are now getting furious at me for making fun of Air Force, I will tell you that my son, who has just turned 15, I have encouraged him, if you're going to join the service, join the Air Force. So just throwing that out there. But
absolutely, and there is definitely an element of jealousy in there too, because
sure.
Oh man, my life would have been so much not easy. My life would have been so much better being part of an organization that actually cared about pilots, aircraft, all that sort of good stuff. I probably would have been less effective, but I might even still be in. So yeah, we go through that 6 months of fixed wing flying training. We all do fixed wing first.
Oh wow, 6 months. Okay.
Yeah, 6 months. You come out of there with about 120 hours, or at least I did. Maybe better guys come out with 100 hours. Yeah, just your basic fixed wing stuff. You come out of there with as if you'd done up to a CPL, as far as your qualifications go, and the level of training. On the little CT-4B, it's a different aircraft now, but the little Parrot, it was a great little plane, variable pitch prop, strong as hell. It could do +6 to -3 Gs. And it was a rugged little truck, and which of course it has to be to cope with the punishment. We put them through. It was fully aerobatic, and yeah, it was a good way for the ADF to basically cull, again is harsh or the wrong term to use, but mostly sort out the guys that aren't going to make it through the course nice and early before they've spent too much money on them. Really, because it's cheap to operate. You can get them up in the air. You can figure out which guys just aren't necessarily picking it up. Pretty much anyone can be a pilot. Like, you can teach anyone to fly, but of course the military wants a guy that's going to learn at a certain rate and take things on board. Like, they don't want someone who can be a pilot, but is going to take twice as long as anyone else to do it. They've got enough applicants. They can
for you guys. I mean, it's a pretty small military.
It is.
You only have so many slots.
Yeah, it's relatively tiny, but we weren't even filling those slots a lot of the time. Then we on my course we started with 13 Army guys, and we finished with 4 after that 6 months.
Wow,
that was that was a pretty high rate of attrition there. The Navy started with 6, finished with 1. And the Air Force guys started with a hell of a lot more than us, but they also lost a hell of a lot more. And it was pretty brutal at the time. Like I said, they're trying to cut guys before they've invested too much money in. They're trying to get rid of guys that aren't learning at the appropriate rate or the rate that the ADF needs. But it made it a pretty brutal place. You got a group of guys that 60 odd guys, and for most of them, their whole dream, their whole lives has been to be a pilot. They've been working at this for years and years. Some of them been through the Defence Force Academy, which is like a university degree. So they've been at this for 4 or 5 years already. And then, suddenly they see their friends around them are all getting cut and dropping. Like a guy he'd scrub, he'd fail his ride, and he'd be pretty much packing his car and heading out the gate that afternoon. After a little while, it was a bit of an era of doom and gloom. You got a bunch of guys that were worried about going up flying because if they mess it up, just have a bad day. It's never just one bad ride, of course. You'll have a bad ride, and then you'll get a couple of remedial, but then you'll be pretty much up for your scrub ride the next one. And it's not like it gets any easier when you're up for a scrub ride. And I know that.
The pressure's on at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had two shots at the nav test, which tells you how that first one went. I'm trying to do this nav test, and there's the little voice in the back of your head going, "Well, maybe we could do ATC if this doesn't work out, or this or that." And a big part of getting through the course was just sort of a bit of resilience and trying to control that little voice in the back of your head that says, "Look, you're probably not cut out for this," because you've generally got an instructor sitting there next to you who's also looking at you saying, "Yeah, you're not cut out for this." And,
so were they pretty hard? I mean, as far as their interaction with you, or did they do a lot of coaching to try to get you past it?
No, it was generally they give you the syllabus, they give you the required teaching, and then that was it. They'd also try and if things weren't gelling or clicking, they'd also try different ways to explain it, or you could obviously ask as many questions as you liked, but you're pretty much on your own. Like if you weren't picking it up, they'd try and steer you in the right direction. If that didn't work, you'd get a 1 for the ride or a 0. And and you felt like you were under the pump the whole time. You got this guy sitting there, and he's next to you, and he's just staring at you out of the corner of his eye, and you can feel it even bearing down on you. Even if
were these were civilian instructors, or they were military?
Mostly military. They did have some civilian contract pilots. And obviously most of them with a military background, although not all. Some of them were entirely civilian. We had one guy who'd flown, I can't remember which country of the former Soviet Union he'd come from, but he'd flown MiGs. So yeah, he was fantastic. Some of his stories were amusing. And then a lot of current serving, mostly Air Force. We had one. I think we only had one Army guy instructing when I was going through, but it would change from time to time. Generally, unless a guy was going for a civilian job down the track or he wanted to change to the Air Force, most Army guys didn't want to go back there to instruct, just because suddenly you're going back flying this little single-engine fixed-wing prop. It's not that exciting.
And where was the school at in Australia?
Yeah, a place called Tamworth, which is out west in New South Wales, sort of in the middle of the nowhere, country music heartland. So, which was good for me because it meant I didn't go out much after work because I'm not a country music fan. And I was probably saved in that I didn't go out much. Most at the time I was one of the older guys. I was in my mid-20s. But most of the younger guys, of course, would go into town and straight to the pub on a weekend, whereas, I'm trying to drag my ass through this course. I knew I had to work at it. So I generally, at the boozer on a Friday night, I'd write myself off, go back, sleep through half of Saturday and have a bit of a relax, and then Sunday straight back into the books because I needed to. I was not a natural at the Air Force way of doing things. And to top it off, my wife, we'd got married at the start of that year, and we just had a daughter. My first kid was born like the weekend before I did GF1, my first flight.
Oh gosh.
So I had that as well, just for a bit of extra pressure, knowing that now I had a family, so I kind of needed this job.
Not only that, just the turmoil of having a newborn in the house and the schedule that I'm sure you were keeping as a flight school student. Well, that
was different, and thanks to my wife, who was incredible. She was actually living in a different city. We were living in Canberra, which was I don't even know how far. It was a long drive. So she stayed in Canberra. We're at a normal house where our friends were to look after the baby, whereas I was living on in Tamworth. So completely separated. With just phone calls, and then we'd catch up sort of every second weekend. I think by the time she was 6 months old, I think I'd seen my daughter about 20 days. Which was it was a little harsh, but I had other stuff to concentrate on the time, so it wasn't too bad for me. And my wife will happily tell you that at least this way she only had one child in the house to look after. She could adjust her schedule to fit the baby. Basically, when the baby's tired, they slept, when the baby's hungry, they ate. So
there's some truth to that sometimes it's easier when the other parent is just gone.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't sound like happy family stuff, but
right.
In a practical sense, it really did work quite nicely. The Air Force way of doing things, as you imagine, it was all about the numbers, and that's where a lot of our Army guys struggled. You got guys that can read a map, that can look out in the distance and can take you where you need to go, but the Air Force wants to know how to do it mathematically. So you're in this system where you're flying down to Air Force low levels down to 500 feet, and you're looking at this little strip map you cut up the day before, and you work out how far off track you are. And so suddenly then you do a math trying to work out what the wind was, and then how many degrees off track and this many miles, and how many degrees to fix that up, and then how many degrees to get back on track. All this, you've got numbers just flying around while you're trying to fly this aircraft, which, because it's fixed wing, luckily it pretty much flies itself, but still. Whereas, of course, the Army mentality, and which we saw later in training, was pretty much, all right, you look up and go, well, I wanted to be over that hill. I'm a little bit left of track. It means the wind's from my right. So on my next leg, I'll just aim a little to the right. And, there's no mass. It's not exact, but it does mean that suddenly you can get your eyes back outside, and concentrate on more important stuff like tactical considerations. So we had a lot of guys, like I said, 13 down to 4, a lot of guys who got scrubbed in that part of training, who could potentially have been perfectly fine Army aviators. And so the Army generally fights a little, or was fighting a little bit of a battle with the Air Force about what the sort of stuff they needed to assess, and the way they needed to teach it. Later on, after I finished, the Army guys, they speared the Army guys off to do their nav training with Army instructors out of a different base called Oki. So they do the completely different style of particularly low-level nav. And that gave us better results. We were getting more people through the system.
Mm. Was there a function there because of it's a tri-service school? Was there a function there that you could essentially switch services, or you were locked in?
You're locked in.
Okay.
You were already completely in the Army, Navy, or Air Force. At any time, you could do service transfers, but it was a lot of paperwork. Certainly wasn't unheard of, but it wasn't a simple thing. Particularly going to the say from Army to Air Force. At least back then, you'd have to do a wings eval, which basically going for a ride in at the time of PC-9, which was much faster than anything we've ever flown. And you go for a check ride, and they can just cut you and say, yeah, this guy's not going to be an Air Force pilot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I knew a few guys that did do it, but not many. Okay.
So at some point, you're obviously picking aircraft. Is that, I'm assuming, just based on your grades, is, an order of merit list to pick what you want?
Not really for us, at least for us at the time. Certainly the Air Force probably did it very differently, and obviously their top performers are going fast jets, that sort of thing. But from after that fixed wing, we still hadn't made any choices yet. We went to Canberra, to where the Army is where we spear off and do our own thing. Now, the Army had the ADF Hilo School, and we're flying the our version of the Kiowa, which is basically a Bell 206 B1 with a couple of little modifications, but really just a green jet Ranger with a stack of extra radios in there.
Yeah.
And that's where, that's the first time we sat in a helicopter, and it was a lot nicer there. It was more of an adult learning environment. You treat it like, well, you've got through Tamworth, you've got through the hard stuff where we cut everyone. Obviously, you've got the goods to be a pilot. So now we're going to teach you. Now we're going to work with you. If there's something you're struggling with, we'll work with you. We'll train you up. We'll get you through this. And because of that, really very few people sort of failed on that portion of the course. Once you were there, unless you had no aptitude for a certain skill, then
but overall you're a commodity at that point. You're something they want to maintain because they've put a lot of time and energy, and you've demonstrated at least the ability to learn and do. So unless you screw it up royally, you're gonna be okay.
Yeah. So and that was great fun. Suddenly you sit in a helicopter and it's all the usual stories you get. You start off in a big field, learning to hover, and then the field gets smaller and smaller. And it was a beautiful training area. It's up about 1,800 feet. It's got a good mountainous region around Canberra where we'd fly. So you could they'd take us into these pads. I remember my first flight. The instructors take you out for a bit of a gimme ride, where he just shows you all the cool stuff that you'll be doing by the end of the course. And one of the pads we're coming down into, I swear we came down about 100 feet from an OG hover, and there was a good 100 feet just coming down through the trees, 10, 15 foot off the mains in every direction, and he's just coming straight down. The whole time he's looking at me and he's chatting about how easy this thing is to fly. I'm not even on the controls and I'm sweating. I'm looking up. The sun's nearly gone. This pad was that huge, and he's telling me, in another 3 months you'll be doing this. And I thought, of course I'm thinking, not a chance. But by the end of it, it's phenomenal, the stuff you pick up in such a short time. The stuff you're doing on your own. Obviously you do the normal in fixed wing. You do all the normal progression stuff, and you have your first solo and all that sort of good stuff. Which I'm sure I was happy with it at the day, but I don't really remember it that well. But my first solo in a helicopter, that was what really gave me a buzz and made me feel like I was going to be a pilot.
Mm-hmm. So you guys do all the training in the Bell, and then at what point do you kind of break off from there?
Yeah, so that's about another 6 months on the Bell, yeah, pretty much just learning to fly the Bell in all different phases, as well as IF, and just a hint of tactics. By the end of that, you get to put in your which aircraft type you want. Which at the time there was only the three. There was to go be a recce pilot, flying the Kiowa, so exactly the same model of Bell we were flying there. Hueys and Blackhawks. At the time, the Chinooks and the couple of fixed wing the Army had were all second tour aircraft. You couldn't go straight into them from training. They were sort of reward positions, I guess. I knew I knew I didn't fit in the Kiowa that well. I'm 6'2" and shorter than you, but still, it wasn't a comfy ride for me.
Yeah, that's not a comfortable seat.
No, it's not. And we wore Alpha helmets. I don't know if you've seen the Alpha Eagle, and it's got the hard visor cover on top. Myself and one of the other guys on course, who he would have been another inch taller than me, we had to take that hard cover off, put a soft leather cover, and we flew with both our visors down just to give us an extra sort of half an inch or so of room there. But even then, we didn't fit that little thing. And plus it's not armed. There's no weapons on this thing at all. It's all sneaking around, hiding, and reporting back home. So
speed is your defense, and you don't have any speed. So
that's pretty much it. Your only defense is to be quiet and uninteresting. So I wasn't that interested in the recce role at the time. So I had that as my third choice. Black Org, I thought, it looks nice. And certainly it's the role I wanted, working with troops on the ground, or at least supporting troops on the ground. But the Huey, I just love the Huey. And for all the reasons everyone does, the noise it makes, how iconic it was. Ours are H model Hueys, still the same aircraft we had in Vietnam with upgrades. Up until recently, I had a Tirana. It's an old 70s muscle car. And it was for the same reasons. I love that car, that I love the Huey. It's made of metal. There's no automation, no power steering, no nothing else. You got hydraulics on the Huey. But, if you're flying a Huey, you're actually flying it. There's nothing in there to assist you.
Yeah. It's a piece of history. So
it's a piece of history, love the old girl. So I had my top choice was Huey, then Black Hawk, then Kiowa. Now, as far as what they allocate, it's pretty much what's available, like who needs pilots, and also a bit of a mix. Our course at the time, they married us up with another course, and we had 3 of the GSOs, or the real officers, and 3 SSOs. And it varies with what the Army wants, but they try and have a bit of a mix, like not just send all the SSOs to Black Hawks and all the GSOs to the Kiowa. So we got a bit of a mix. And sure enough, I got my third choice. I was sent to Kiowas initially. Oh. And yes, and I had about 30 seconds of thinking, oh man, that sucks, before I remembered these, what am I talking about? These guys are going to let me fly a turbine helicopter. Honestly, I'm happy to be doing anything. This it's fantastic. So anyway, and plus all the ground crewmen we had at the school, that all come from Kiowa squadrons. So these guys hit me up telling me, look, you're going to love it. It's the coolest job. With the most laid back, capable people, and you can have a great time. So cool. I thought beauty, and I set myself to becoming the best recce pilot the world had ever seen, and I was going to love the job, and it was great. And then, sure enough, 2 weeks later, they decided, they got their mix of people wrong. They wanted to adjust some things. So now you've
emotionally prepared yourself for one thing, and now they're doing.
Yeah. I was all about reconnaissance, and screw those Black Hawk guys. Who the hell wants to do air mobile? So sure enough, I get changed to Black Hawks, and I'm like, all right. So I've just been gobbing off for the last 2 weeks about Smack Hawks and not want to fly them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So made a 180 and decided, cool, Black Hawk. It's powerful. It's capable. It's got all the good stuff. Going to do air mobiles. It's going to be great. I'm going to be the best air mobile pilot the world has ever seen. And screw those recce guys. The damn Kiowa's got no power. And then sure enough, dedicated myself to that. And then the day of graduation, like 4 hours before our grad dinner, the chief instructor calls myself and one of the other guys in and says, "Hey, look, they've opened up one Huey slot, and both you guys wanted Huey's first choice." And he said, "I'll come back in a minute and see who's going." And he left us to it. And I'm looking at the other guy, and I don't want to say anything because I still really want Huey's, and we were good mates. And luckily, he spoke first, and he said, "Look, I'm not staying in the army for the long term. I'm going to get out and get a civvy job down the track. So probably best I start racking up my multi-engine hours now." So. He took the hit. We didn't have to Rochambeau for it or anything. He took the hit and went Black Hawk. So I had all three of my choices, but luckily ended on the correct one. And and then up to Oki in Queensland, which is the School of Army Aviation, which is where you do your type transition onto whichever aircraft you're going to. And then just a couple of months learning to fly the Huey. And just love the old girl. She's just beautiful. She feels like a muscle car. She doesn't have enough power. She's got enough power to get the job done most days. She hasn't got enough power to get you out of trouble if you screw things up. And flying that aircraft, I got to learn a lot about aircraft handling and where the edges of certain things are because it didn't have enough power, or it didn't have enough tail rotor authority, And of course, the Army being the Army, the troops you're supporting, they always show up with an extra person, or they've got gear they didn't tell you they had. And it was great. It was my dream aircraft, and I love flying.
So what was the operational difference between having Blackhawks and Hueys? I mean, were they kind of doing the same mission? It was just phasing them out, or what?
Yeah, well, we were in a different regiment initially. At the time, we just had the two regiments, the 1st and the 5th. First was the reconnaissance regiment with the two Kiowa squadrons, but they also had the Huey squadron as its utility aircraft, whereas 5-7 had the Black Hawks and the Chinooks. They're obviously the air mobile guys. So the Hueys, we were just we're a dog's body, the perfect utility aircraft that. The reconnaissance regiment, the headquarters, they didn't want anything to do with us. They were focused on reconnaissance and that role. But of course, they had a squadron of Hueys they could use and abuse for every rubbish little job around the country that the other bigger important aircraft didn't have time to do. And that was pretty much our life. It was good. It was a good learning experience because you had to be ready for anything. You'd show up to an exercise. We were just we'd be there for medevac. You'd have two aircraft online for medevac with a couple of doctors and nurses, and you'd show up. And within the first half hour, when the ground force commander realizes he's got a couple of Hueys, next thing you know, you're doing resupply missions, you're doing range clearances, you're doing every other little job that he's got that we can do faster than his ground vehicles. You'd be sent across the country to go work with some little reserve unit that isn't important enough to warrant getting a troop of Black Hawks, but they still want to do training, they still want air support. Mm-hmm. So you get given 2 or 3 Hueys, and you get told to disappear for a month and support these guys, and please just don't make the papers.
Sometimes that's the best environment, right? I mean, when you're the redheaded stepchild, or the Isle of Misfit Toys, and you kind of just get left alone, and it builds, I think, stronger bonds, and you get kind of cooler little things that doesn't look sexy on paper, but when you do it, you're like, this is the best thing ever.
It was great for that. You had to learn to be self-sufficient. Our brigade, of course, they were responsible for us, gave us what we needed, but they really didn't want to be bothered with what we were doing. They're concentrating on big army stuff, big air mobile things, big reconnaissance things. You'd basically just manage your own business, including so many jobs I had where there'd be one pilot, one loadmaster, or our crew chief equivalent, and a couple of engineers, and you have an aircraft with enough hours free between major maintenance to get the job done. And you just disappear into the wilderness for a month. And apart from ringing the wife to see how she was, no one would hear from you as long as you didn't make the papers. And it was great. And you had to be able to organize your own, fuel, rations, everything else. The number of times you'd show up at an exercise as a medevac and realize that no one had been assigned, you hadn't been attached to any unit for food or rations, because no one ever thinks about this admin stuff. They're all thinking about storming across the plains with a troop of tanks or whatever. They've ticked a box on the sheet that says, we need medevac, and that's as much thought as they've given it. So you'd show up, say, hey, all right, we're going to set our stuff here. Who's feeding us? And you just get blank stares all around. And realize, oh crap. But we'd generally do our own little black market there. You'd find out where the cooks were. You'd send a couple of vehicles to bring the cooks back. You'd start up some Hueys, and you'd just give them a joyride. You'd throw them around the air for half an hour, high fives all around, and then next thing you know, we've got fresh meat packs every night for dinner. Flying around, you'd see where the firefighters have repositioned their little bladders of water that look like a little swimming pool. Send a couple of vehicles to pick up the firefighters, throw them around in the air, give them a joyride, take them up and down the beach. Next thing you know, they suddenly decide they need to reposition some water in our camp, and boom, we've got a swimming pool. And that's pretty much how we got the job done. A lot of single pilot stuff, a lot of just sort of doing your own thing, and it was great. Especially like flying across Australia, there's big expanses of nothing in the middle there. And sort of learning how to organise to have some drums left in a certain spot for you to fuel up on the way, because there aren't airports within range. It was great for that. The other cool role we had too was the gunships. We still had the Huey gunships when I got there. Now it wasn't a capability. We were never going to send a Huey gunship anywhere dangerous. It was pretty much kept as a training platform, if you like, because we knew we were going to get armed reconnaissance helicopters down the track. So we needed to keep the skills up primarily of the ground guys as far as managing EOLAs and FARPs, loading the aircraft, all that sort of thing. You need guys that are qualified and just understand the basics of how to set up an EOLA or a explosive ordnance loading area there. And that's why we kept the Hueys, the Huey gunships going, because they had the miniguns and the 2.75-inch rockets. Having said that,
you just kept it for the culture, essentially, just kind of keeping the mentality.
Yeah, that's it. They'd only get to live fire. I'm pretty sure it was only like once a year, and it wasn't even every year for a live fire. We weren't using the rockets. When I got there, they'd basically sort of they'd canned the rockets because they'd had a mishap years earlier, something to do with some propellant problems. So they just thought, well, it's just easier to get rid of them. So we only armed them, sort of once a year to qualify a couple of guys. And I was junior at the time. I never got qualified on the actual weapons, but we'd fly around with them quite regularly. Again, just to practice, to keep the skills up. And then occasionally for veteran flight pass, we did a lot of those too. You can imagine a lot of Vietnam vets have got a strong connection with the Huey.
Oh, yeah, sure.
They were run by our Air Force back in Vietnam, but the same aircraft. And so we would. That was another great part of being in a Huey squadron. We'd fly around to a lot of memorial dedications, a lot of veteran gatherings. So you'd show up, you'd do a fly pass for the guys, you'd land at a nearby park so they could have a look over and a crawl over the aircraft, and then generally spend the rest of the weekend drinking and occasionally being offered drugs. It was great. We got a fairly active veteran motorcycle group community there. They're all lovely fellas, but they'd forget that we couldn't do the same things they could do.
So how many hours did you end up flying in the Huey?
I was there for about 4.5 years, and it was about just under 1,300 hours on the Huey. Oh, okay. So that was the other great thing about the Huey was it was reliable. There are not that many things in there to break, but they just kept going, and anything that did break, you could generally sort of realign with a hammer just to keep it going. They were cheap to run. You get a lot of hours, which was great for just building your hands and feet and your experience.
Sure. So after that 4 years is when you went over to Chinooks?
Basically I was starting to get sort of tired in that the peacetime role. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to do anything. We weren't going to send our Hueys anywhere particularly dangerous. Although we had done the Boxing Day tsunami, that was a good trip, a perfect job for the Huey. yeah, so I started looking around thinking, well, what else am I going to do? And as well as it was time to post me out. Like Army, at least Australian Army career management is every 3 to 4 years, you just all change seats. And so the careers advisor is telling me, well, you got to do something else. Doesn't matter that I was a troop commander at the time. I was a maintenance test pilot. I had all these qualifications. I was sort of a fairly valuable resource for the Huey. Nope, we got to spend more money on you and send you to a different aircraft. So the Chinooks were in Afghanistan at the time, and obviously that was sort of the dream gig. The Black Hawks were in Timor, which was a good deployment, but it was more certainly at the time it was more of a low level conflict against rebel type activity. But the Afghanistan was perfect, and it was on the Chinook, which at the time I was a little reluctant about, because it looks like a bus. You assume it flies and it handles like a bus. It's not.
It can have mid-airs with itself.
It can do all that sort of stuff. And before Afghanistan, our Chinook squadron had been kind of a retirement squadron. It was a second tour one. It was like your reward posting after you've done your hard yards on a Huey or a Black Hawk, or a lot of Kiowa guys went to it as well. But because our Chinooks, they weren't particularly kitted out with defensive gear or weapons. They rarely went bush or field, which was as a bonus for the older guys. And you got to do your sim trips. Well, first of all, you did your training at Fort Rucker, so that's a good trip. And we did our annual sim trips in Seattle, because we only had 6 Chinooks in our entire fleet. That's it for the whole country.
Oh, wow.
So, just not economically viable for us to have our own sim or to use our aircraft just for that training. So much cheaper to send us over business class, which is how our ADF sent officers overseas at the time, which was nice. And then, you get a 3-week, with typical Army fashion, you'd cram a 1-week syllabus into 3 weeks. And you'd have a paid holiday over to Seattle. We'd usually take a couple of weeks leave on the end of it and explore the Northwest. So it really was a retirement squadron for taking it easy and enjoying yourself. But then, of course, Afghanistan kicked off, and then suddenly, a lot of the older guys moved on because it wasn't a retirement squadron anymore.
What do you mean we have to actually do stuff?
Yeah, now having said all those guys, they did a trip or two, and
Sure.
and that was great. But it was especially some of them were getting older and they moved on. But it did also mean the aircraft got kitted up quite nicely. The government, like anyone, but probably more so when you've only got 6 of them. If we were to lose an aircraft, and particularly the media could point to the government not having it equipped, correctly, or being able to defend itself, they'd be crucified. So they were happy to spend the money. And we got miniguns, the M134D miniguns in each door. At the time, I think we were the only sort of regular Army Chinooks to have those. We got lots of armor plating. We got Blue Force tracker installed, which we didn't have. We got a full countermeasure system with good missile warning sensors. We were brilliantly kitted out, had all the good toys. But despite that, I was sure it was going to be a bus. And but put my hand up, said, I'd love to go Chinooks. Got selected for it, and went across for 3 months. I think it was about 3 months at Rucker. Just learning on the normal AQC track over there, which was a great trip. Really, really loved it. Alabama, you'd never live there, but it's great for a drinking trip.
Yeah. Well, it's close to the beach, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd spent plenty of time down at PC and Destin. Did the course there. We finished off with a month in Seattle to do all our instrument rating and normal emergency rides up there. Got back home and pretty much, jumped in the car with the family, moved up north to my new base in Townsville, did my Australian conversion, and then boom, straight over to Afghanistan in November 2006. The nice thing was, on course in Rucker, my fears were sort of confirmed that this thing was a bus. You just fly sort of from airfield to airfield, and it's very slow, and you're not going to do anything interesting. But then, of course, that's just the basic course. I got back to Australia and did my Australian conversion, and suddenly I'm flying with a guy, one of our older ex-Air Force guys, And the guy was a machine. He was a master at flying this the Chinook. Suddenly we're flying it like a Huey. Like, you know, we're doing single engine roll-on landings into a pad so tight that I would have been worried taking a Huey into it. Yeah, we're flying this thing around like it's a sports car, and yeah, suddenly I started to feel a lot better about the Chinook. You know, like, this thing. I always knew it had a lot of power, but yeah, the way we were flying it, you were using all its power. You're doing pretty good, exciting dust approaches. Yeah, we really did fly it tactically well.
And so you did this tour, and then you did another tour with the U.S., or how did that work out?
Yeah, well, what we had in Afghanistan, we only had 2 Chinooks, a whole heap of other units as well doing other things, but aviation-wise, it was just the 2 Chinooks. Now, you know, obviously on your own, you can't really get a lot done just for the 2 Chinooks. Usually one's in maintenance, and you know, you always fly everywhere, at least in pairs. So basically our task group just attached on to the US task force that was there. And basically became just another 2 of the US task force's Chinooks. I think as I got there, I believe the 10th Mountain was just leaving towards the end of 06. I don't recall exactly, but we started working with the 82nd guys, and yeah, it was as if we were just 2 more of the 82nd's Chinooks as far as tasking goes. We did all their normal tasking. And this way we got to basically share the resources. You know, suddenly we're able to fly in you know, formations with other Chinooks. We've got access to the Apaches. Didn't do much work with the OHs over there, and just the normal tasking through their systems. So we'd support anyone the US task force was supporting. But then when it came time to support Australian troops, particularly Special Forces guys up in Tarin Kowt, we could basically present to the command, the US task force, say, hey, we've got this. They generally send down a couple of you know, operators and their ink guys who put on a bit of a show for the colonel, and they give him this you know, a nice big PowerPoint presentation with lots of cool pictures and videos, and use all the keywords about all the exciting things they want to do, and like really sell it to him. And then yeah, next thing you know, we were able to take. He'd give us all the resources he could. So we could go up to Tarin Kowt, do jobs supporting Australian troops with our 2 Chinooks. But on top of that, we'd have a couple of Black Hawks with us, potentially the HH-60s, the US Air Force guys. We'd have a couple of US Apaches with us. We'd also have the resources overhead. You know, you'd have Predators overhead. You'd have occasionally AC-130s, which was, you know, fantastic, and all stuff that even whether or not we could have done it, I don't know. But it would have been a nightmare to organise if we were just, you know, 2 Australian Army Chinooks doing our own thing with no real connections other than, you know, swapping slouch hats and sly beers under the table to try and get jobs done.
When I was in TK, and we worked with your Special Forces guys, and yeah, they could obviously work all those angles just by the very nature of who they were. You know, they had a line on all that stuff, but that was always a good time working with them.
Yeah, they get things done. And it's best if you don't ask how.
Yeah, that's right.
And look, it was just perfect for us, you know. Like, we obviously had our responsibility was obviously to hold up our end of the bargain, you know, make sure our aircraft's serviceable, that we're doing things the way the US Task Force wanted it done. You know, you're not going to take on board all those resources and all that help, and then you know, be a schmuck about it. You got to make sure you're doing the job the way they want it done. But generally, it was a really, really good working relationship. We would generally, like, all of our pilots, once they were signed off as a Chinook captain, they'd you know, basically just instantly get the training and get signed off as AMC as well. There was quite a lot of sort of mutual respect or regard for the training systems that we had, and like I said, our training system generally put out someone who was a lot closer to an operational pilot than sort of Rucker did, because you know, Rucker puts out your basic guy, then they get sent to the unit to be trained up to be operational. Whereas like in the Australian Army, we take care of that all in training. So the guy you get in the squadron is basically a little more feature complete.
What? So how many deployments did you end up doing?
Three all up over now. When I say three, it's all up. That's still only about 13 months, I think, because we don't do the deployments like you crazy kids do. God, if I went away for a year, I wouldn't expect my wife to be there when I got home.
Yeah, well, sometimes they're not.
I know. It's nuts, and I think when we first got there, again, it might have been the 10th Mountain guys. They'd done their 12 months, and I think some of the guys had even left country when they decided, no, you're doing another 4 months.
Yeah.
And suddenly ISAF stood for I stayed another 4. But I don't know how you. Yeah, I know you don't keep everyone in the military, but I don't know how you keep anyone in the military when with stuff like that. So we generally would do about 4 months for rotation, which was pretty nice. Like, you don't. Unless you're getting absolutely flogged, you're not going to get too fatigued in 4 months. And that was more of an aviation thing, too. A lot of the ground guys would do 8 months. Because you imagine the administrative burden of cycling that many guys through.
Yeah, well, and that's what it really boils down to is the cost of moving, the sheer volume of stuff that you're moving. And I mean, my last tour was a 5 month, and you're right. Like emotionally, it was good because it was like, oh, it's only 5 months. But also in the role that I had, which was essentially the chief of staff and trying to move everything, it was literally I showed up, and most of my staff was already there when I showed up. And the first meeting I had with them was, okay, we're planning the departure, and it's like, we've only just got here, but that's how long it takes to move all that crap. So there's something to be said for a long tour, but on the just individual level, 4 or 5 months sounds really nice.
Yeah, like it's fatigue. Like I said, unless you're really getting smashed, fatigue hasn't really kicked in by 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
But as far as especially for guys with families and for nearly all of our aviation guys, I think different from regular Army, where in aviation, I think at the time the average age is about 31, and it's a guy married, potentially second marriage, but with a couple of kids, so they're all family guys. 4 or 5 month trip away from home that's pretty good. You're still going to, generally speaking, hold families together, and that's why you can afford to do it year in year out. The other difference we've got too, I guess, is we only had the one Chinook unit, so you're almost guaranteed you were going to go every year. So doing a 4 month trip was fine. You could do that. You get back. The only part of that didn't quite work was you get back from your 4 month deployment, and great, and then a week later you're due to go to your annual sim in Seattle for another 3 weeks, and you go do that, or you come back and you do a course or something like that. So you're still never spending much time at home, just not actually on deployment. And again, different to you guys, the allowances were also quite good. Like, a lot of guys were fighting for these deployments because their allowances were very, very generous. And normal pay would become tax-free while we're over there, which is fairly normal. But then with the different allowances based on the theatre we're in, and separation allowance and all the different things they have, we're generally getting normal pay tax-free and then another tax-free $250 a day.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys make in a day in combat. That's like our combat pay for the month or something. I can't remember what the number is, but it was astounding.
It's a crazy amount, but then again, that's what they've worked out they need to do to get people to stay in and keep doing this stuff year after year. I guarantee when the economy goes downhill and is in a bit of a lull, the allowances will also go down because they don't really need to keep people in that much. But that's what it was at the time. So it's fantastic if you're smart. You go away for a 4 month deployment and you come back and you've got a good deposit on your house sorted out. So a lot of guys could quite happily do deployments just for the financial reasons as well. Me, I didn't tell anyone, of course, but I would have done it without the allowances. It was great over there. It was, I mentioned all the magazines I had when I was a kid. The airplane magazines. Well, suddenly I'm over there, and all those aircraft I looked at when I was a kid, they're all taxiing past my Chinook. Yeah, you'd be there pre-flighting your aircraft, and a couple of AV-8s go past, or a couple of A-10s. Doing a mission with an AC-130 overhead, like that's just the coolest stuff out.
Yeah, every day at Kandahar is like an air show. So
it was seriously a dream for me, like being a mad aircraft spotter. I just love military aircraft. And sort of being a part of it or being involved in those missions was just awesome, and especially with all the toys. They're doing a mission doing an insertion with the SAS guys, and you're putting him into this. It's obviously they want a particular grid, but it's just a spot on a road in the middle of this massive big valley with no distinguishing features. So on NVGs, you come over that last hill and you're looking at it going, well, it all looks the same. But you can just ask the AC-130 for a sparkle, and then suddenly, boom, you've got this big IR dot on the ground that's accurate to 8 or 10 figure. It's just the coolest thing out to be able to use that stuff. Having the AC call targets, you call for the cherry ice call before you get to your RP or your release point, and he'll tell you, right, this bearing, this distance, there's 2 guys and a dog sitting by a fire. This bearing distance, there's a hut, and you know that every one of these things he's talking about has been stored as a target. So, if that dog looks at us funny, he can press a couple of buttons and suddenly that target disappears. It's just phenomenal. The stuff that we can't do back home. Like I said, we're very, very, by international standards, a very small military. 6 Chinooks. I think we had somewhere around 36 odd Black Hawks, plus or minus a couple. Similar number of Hueys, and that's about it. But having said that, this is in a country of I don't even know what we're up to now, but it's somewhere around 25 million people. So
yeah, I was going to say, I think the population of Dallas is the same size as Australia or something. Some crazy number when you compare the two countries.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a very different part of the world we're down in. Overall, it's a very quiet, very pretty safe and non-confrontational part of the world down here. We're a fairly different society. Culturally, we're very, very similar to Americans, but as far as the military side of things, we're not a very militaristic society at all because we haven't had to be. We've never been attacked on our. Well, no, I shouldn't say that, never. But recently, we haven't been attacked on our own soil. That sort of thing. There's not that general culture of needing to be militarily strong in Australia, which is, for a guy who gets out of the army, is also kind of nice. It's a bit relaxing.
So when did you get out of the army?
I got back from my last trip mid-2010, and I pretty much got out then. But I had about 6 months of long service leave because that was 11 years in the army by that stage. So I had long service leave, the remainder of my leave balance. So I took about 6 months of technically still being in the army, but not really. Right. Sleeping in, not shaving, just relaxing, knowing that I was coming to a medical job which would probably be pretty demanding on my time, at least initially, while I got used to the job. And then 2011, moved back down south to Melbourne in the state of Victoria down here, which is originally where I was from growing up. Down doing medical work initially in a Bell 412. So back to my Huey roots. It was a beautiful girl, and in typical Bell fashion, they had a good idea in the 50s, and they haven't done a lot with it since. They just put more engines and more stuff in there, but it's still a Huey. Yeah. So many of the limits were still the same as in an H model Huey. It was ridiculous. And I've been doing that for I've just ticked over 10 years now, doing EMS work down here, and now we fly an Augusta Westland 139, which is a fantastic aircraft for EMS work. Military work, I never want to sit in anything European, but for civilian or EMS work, it's fantastic.
So you're going to be doing that for the foreseeable future? You're pretty happy with it?
I'm very happy with it. I dare say I'm hoping I've got another, depending on my enthusiasm, because the 2 a.m. wake-ups sometimes wear you down a little. But I'm hoping I've got another 5 to 10 years of this before, hopefully sort of retire or semi-retire. I love the work, particularly for a guy coming out of the military who'd done deployments, who needed that little bit of excitement or purpose. This is the perfect job for me. I would have really struggled going to, say, offshore, going out to oil rigs and back, doing shuttle runs, because I definitely needed more adrenaline or purpose to the work to keep me going. Because I didn't have really the only real drama I had adjusting to civilian life when I came back was the boredom. and especially moving down here in Victoria, which is has almost nothing to do with the military down here, is great. You really don't hear about the military unless something big happens, which is kind of nice to get that separation so you're not thinking about it all the time. But it's also a shock to the system when you've been in the military for the last sort of 15 years on and off. Everything focused towards that. Now you're dealing with normal civilian people who are excited about strange things like reality TV and Justin Bieber and all this stuff that I didn't understand. They don't swear as much as we do, and
that's a fact.
Different. But coming to ambulance work, the nice thing was it was a very, very similar culture to the military. Very few of our paramedics have been in the military, but it's a very, very similar culture. It's sort of more action orientated. You consider yourself separate to normal civilians because, of course, we see the stupid things our patients do all the time. So it's a male-dominated workspace, which I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's certainly a nice transition for someone coming from the Army, which very male-dominated workspace, to the ambulance work. And, you can generally, within reason, you can swear, scratch yourself and carry on like an idiot quite happily without upsetting anyone, whereas in a normal workspace I'm sure I'd be in front of HR most days.
Yeah, they frown on that at IBM. So.
They do, yeah, it's weird. But no, and it's nice. And of course when the phone rings, it's an actual job. You do some particularly winch currency training with the paramedics, but it's nice. I go to work, I'll check. I'll make sure the aircraft's ready. It's got some hours on it. I'll check the weather and NOTAMs for our area, for our state, just to see there's nothing that instantly jumps out and catches my attention. And then other than that, I'll go upstairs. I'll have a nice coffee. I'll do the quiz with the guys that are online today. If the phone doesn't ring, I'll do my secondary duties during the day. I'm the MVG guy. Any other stuff like wash the aircraft or tidy up around the place. But after lunch, if the phone doesn't ring, I might put my feet up in a recliner and have a snooze. And unlike the military, I haven't got someone sticking their head in and saying, "Well, why aren't you working? Why aren't you pretending to look busy?" Because these guys, all they care about is that the aircraft's online, I've got pants on, and I'm ready to go. And that's it. So, look, if I'm there managing my fatigue or resting, great, because they know we do a 10-hour shift during the day and a 14-hour shift during the night. Now, at night, we're encouraged to do no more than an hour of our secondary duty. Do about an hour of that, have dinner, maybe watch some TV, and then get to bed. We've all got our own bedrooms, nice and quiet. Because they know that if the phone then rings half an hour before shift change in the morning, you might be on the go for another 6 hours. And if you've stayed up all night, pretending to work or writing documents or whatever, suddenly that's a 20-hour shift, and that's not going to work for anyone. And the ambulance service, all they care about is that the aircraft's ready to go, ready to respond. 10 minutes by day, 20 minutes by night gives us extra 10 minutes for the increased planning and also to get your pants back on. But and that 10 minutes we pretty much always achieve. Look, if the weather's not particularly interesting and it's not something like an offshore job, it'll come over the PA system. You get a primary to a certain town, and as long as it's somewhere I've heard of, we can generally just walk straight out of the aircraft, jump in, start up, and go. And we'll work out the rest en route. You don't need a flight plan. You don't need any of this. As I'm starting up, I'll tell Tower, hey, I'm going to be medevac for Wangaratta. And that's not asking for a clearance. That's just so he can start sort of clearing a bit of a path, make sure that when I do call for a clearance, he can get me on the go straight away. If it is more complex, the weather's rubbish, or there is more to think about, then sit down the computer, we'll punch out a plan. Takes a couple of extra minutes, but the nice thing is we got ATC looking after us. The airfield I stage out of, Essendon, it's in the CTR as Tullamarine or Melbourne Airport, which is our major international airport. So there is a little bit of deconfliction that comes with that if I need to go across the international one. But the nice thing is I've got Tower, and our ATC guys are phenomenal, especially considering the the problems we lump them with sometimes will come up on no notice and say, hey, I need to go this way and I'm medivac. They'll move Qantas out of the way for us. They'll make it work, and especially because some of the crazy stuff we can do that's completely like anyone else. In the air, I might elect to launch initially low level on NVGs at night, knowing that the weather is rubbish on the route, and if I can't scoot through on the GOGs, I'm going to need to change category and punch on up into his airspace. Now, we'll work with them. I'll give them a heads up and say, hey, I'm doing this. I'll give you as much notice as I can, but in the next few minutes, I may need to change category and climb to 5,000, just so you can start clearing a path. But yeah, they're fantastic the way they work with us to get the job done.
Well, it sounds like a fun job, just inflexible on the pants. So
yeah, I know. We're working on it.
With the price,
we're working on it. see, now that's unlike the military, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you definitely got to wear pants there. Well, cool, man. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing that with us. And it's good to talk to you.
Hey, no problem at all, man. Good to talk to you. And if anyone wants to ask any more questions, feel free. You generally know where to find me on the Discord.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate you, giving us some insight into how it all works in the land down under, and some interesting feedback on how it is to work with the U.S. Army in certain situations.
I know. I get the feeling I'm about to meet a few people from the 101st.
Yeah, you pull off some Christmas card lists, I think.
The nice thing is, though, I'll know if they're really from the 101st because they'll agree with me.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of working with the Australian Defence Force in multiple ways, both in combat and in training. And I got to tell you, I was always impressed. A great bunch of guys and gals who are very mission focused and aggressive in their action. I'm very thankful for Scott for coming onto the show, and I look forward to speaking with some other Aussies here in the future. Don't forget to check out the website, www.thelowlevelhellpodcast.com, and you can see the pictures that Scott and our other guests have provided. While you're there, you can follow links to our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and if you feel compelled to support the show financially, you can take a look at our Patreon and the different tiers of support, along with the bonus content that some of them provide, as well as access to our DCS server for you gamers, and other side events that we try to run monthly. A reminder that views expressed by the guests and hosts are their own and do not represent the Department of Defense or any private business. We'll wrap up International Month on the next one. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy, and just be good dudes and dudettes to one another. Take care.